Hotep, and welcome to Matters of Diversity with Dr. B. Today, I'm excited to have with me Elizabeth Thompson. Let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth, and we're going to get into a really good conversation today, especially about what's happening in UCF downtown and the Paramore area. So Elizabeth is the Director of Community Engagement for the UCF Downtown Valencia College Downtown Campus. This 15-acre campus brings an innovative learning environment to downtown Orlando, increasing access to education, internships, certifications, jobs, and a host of other resources to the downtown Paramore community. Elizabeth is a native of the Orlando area who previously served as the executive director of nonprofit organization, the Association to Preserve African American Society, History and Tradition Incorporated, PAST Incorporated. The cornerstone of PAST Incorporated efforts lie in the operation of the Wells-Built Museum of African American History and Culture. The Wells-Built Museum celebrates the important contributions of African Americans and what they have brought to the Central Florida community. Prior to her role with PAST, Elizabeth worked in pharmaceutical sales and served as a marketing manager for a charter school company. She has always enjoyed working with clients, visitors, or community partners to attain mutually beneficial business objectives, and is a strong believer in collaboration and partnership. And I know that for truth. She earned her bachelor's degree from Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Please help me in welcoming in Elizabeth Thompson. It's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. I've been looking to have you for a while now, and you're traveling today. So we know that you're in an airport, and so I appreciate you taking the time out before you get on your flight to kind of communicate with us. So tell me, what's been going on? How you been?
I've been good. I can't complain at all. Like you said, we've been trying to make this happen. And so no matter what was going on, I was determined to be here. I enjoy the programming that you bring and the information and the education. And so I'm glad to be a guest. And I thank you again for having me.
Oh, great. So we know that every once in a while you might have some sound coming from the airport there, but can you kind of tell me a little bit about the Wells-Built Museum and how you got involved with that?
Absolutely. So the Wells-Built Museum of African American History and Culture is in downtown Orlando, but specifically it's in Paramore. And the building that we are housed in is 90 plus years old. And so the building that we are in is the first hotel in Orlando that would rent rooms to African Americans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it opened in the 1920s. And it's called the Wells-Built. It was even then the Wells-Built Hotel. And that's because it was built by one of the area's first African-American physicians. Y'all excuse the background noise.
Don't worry about it. It's all good.
And so Dr. Wells, when he came, understood that the area needed healthcare. But once he got here, he also understood that there were other needs that the African-American community had. And at that time, there were no hotels that would rent rooms to African-Americans at all. So he decided that he would build one. And I say that in all terms of the meaning of the terms. He used his own finances.
Right.
He used the proceeds from his medical practice because he couldn't get a traditional or commercial loan. Right. Because he was a Black man. Even though he was a physician, he was still a Black man and couldn't get lending from a bank. So he personally took proceeds from his medical practice and put it towards the building of the Wells-Built Hotel. Okay. And it's a 2-story building. Right now, the bottom floor houses most of the memorabilia and artifacts that incorporate the museum. At that time, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the top floor was where all of the hotel rooms were, and it was a 20-room hotel.
Okay.
And he intentionally left the bottom floor, let's say, open, because he wanted it to function as storefront space for other African American business people. So he wanted to be sure that he provided a physical space for other Black business owners, because he knew how hard it could be to start a business, get space. And so while the top floor were the hotel rooms, the bottom floor were storefront spaces for other Black businesses in the Paramore area. And so that's how the hotel came to be of prominence. And in 20 years ago, it opened as a museum. And so since that time, we've had the privilege and the honor to be able to talk with visitors and residents and schools, school groups about the contributions that African Americans have made in Orlando specifically. Because I think for a lot of people, Orlando is synonymous with Disney or Universal,
Right.
but we don't hear enough and learn enough about the Black people who helped forge this community and make it somewhere where you want to bring a Disney or a Universal.
Nice. That's so beautiful. I mean, and your contributions to this place has been phenomenal. You just brought all your expertise and your talent to kind of building it up. So what are some of the highlights that you had from your career working in the Wells Belt?
Well, I am a big believer in even just the physical space, right? So I get to walk into a building where Ray Charles has slept and stayed. I get to work in a place where Roy Campanella, baseball player, has stayed. I get to work in a building where Thurgood Marshall stayed for a couple of weeks when he was helping to defend the Groveland Four in Groveland, Florida. Right. So the physical building has history, and I think we are able to absorb that and embody that. But also, the highlight of my time at the Wells Bowl, I have to say, has come about with being able to speak with younger people. So much when we talk about African American history, so much is focused on slave trade and enslavement. But I like to be able to talk also about the history of accomplishment and achievement. And I like to be able to bring forward the fact that historically speaking, African Americans are patent holders and inventors and doctors and lawyers. And so we have every bit as much entitlement to achieving as we do to overcoming. It's not a one note history of adversity, adversity, adversity. Yeah. It is also a history of innovation and education and intelligence. And I like to be able to talk with young people about that as well.
Excellent, excellent. So, the past couple of days, I'm going to step away from Orlando for a hot minute. The past couple of days, the world has been kind of brought to bear to think about what's going on in Tulsa and what happened 100 years ago. And I'm just listening to you talk about the education and the hotel and people not being able to stay in other hotels and had to build this hotel for Black folks to be able to have some place to house themselves. And I think about how they were building a community in Tulsa. And so it kind of reminds me when you say this building was built on behalf of Black folk. That's what Tulsa was about. That's what Tulsa was doing. And so do you see the ties there, and how do you kind of put together the lineage of what we were doing as Black folk, patent holders, all those other things in the Orlando area, and how we are also connected with our brothers and sisters who are in the Tulsa area?
I think so much of that it's so important, right? Because of course in Tulsa you had the Stratford Hotel, and you had it was so thriving that it became known as Black Wall Street, and the money was there and circulating throughout the community and able to sustain families and entire communities. And so you have again a history of taking something, a location that was supposedly abandoned or not the most ideal. And then we, as a people come, establish commerce, establish education, establish economics, and we make it so thriving that it becomes, to a certain extent, a point of jealousy for other communities. And then to, widely accepted, a target, because it was so interdependent, or it was so independent, that it became like, okay, well, certainly they need help or rules. And it's like, no, leave us alone and let us do well.
Let us do our thing, right? Let us be great. Let us be great on our own. We can do it.
Let us be great. And so you certainly see that, not just in Tulsa, but of course in Paramore. Paramore was the historically Black area of town. And that's where the Black community of Orlando, very early Orlando, lived. And it is a place where entrepreneurs saw a need for businesses, and they built those businesses. And so you had cleaners, and you had grocery stores, and you had all of these things that could sustain and make a thriving community. And so in that way, and honestly, I tell people all of the time, really, no matter where you're visiting from, you probably have, historically speaking, a Black community that is reflective of this in your area. If you're from New York, you have Harlem. If you're from, Chicago, or anywhere you are from, you probably have an historically Black area that is going to be reminiscent of Tulsa, but also of Paramore and all of those things, a place where we came together.
About the gentrification of these areas, and when you just talked about that just now, it reminded me of Eatonville, right here in Florida as well. And I mean, I'm quite sure that there were ties even between those two communities with regards to Paramore and Eatonville.
Absolutely, especially even in the people, right? I think a lot of times what you would find is that people who are working towards a common goal, economic independence, education, and things like that, they were connected. And so Dr. Wells, who I mentioned, is the one who built the hotel. He was actually a pallbearer at Mary McLeod Bethune's funeral, because they were connected. They both wanted to expand educational opportunities to the Black community. And so you get to know these people, and you get to become friends, and you get to align yourselves. And so, yeah, there was definitely, a cohesion between the communities, because we were working towards a lot of the same goals and trying to expand the opportunities.
Education is so important. And I can hear the pride in your voice just talking about the knowledge that you have. How come that's so important for our youth? How come that's so important for us as a Black community to know that information that you have stored there? And like I said, you're beaming almost in terms of how you're talking and sharing about it. And I want to know, in your mind, how do we connect that to our youth so that they don't forget, they never forget, what we really can stand ourselves on?
So it's a cliche, right? But I always say you can't be what you can't see. And so that to me is why it's important, because we have to learn, we have to read texts written by us from our point of view that tell our story. We have to understand the struggles that our forebears, ancestors, forefathers have gone through. And that might help us appreciate the opportunities that maybe sometimes we take for granted now. And so education is that way. Education is that linchpin. It's that exposure. It's that exposure to even things that you may not be familiar with. And it shapes how you see yourself and your worldview. And if you only get one aspect of education, if you only get one story, if you only get one side, then you are not understanding the complete picture, and you are not having a complete worldview. And so that's, to me, why I get excited about it, because I think I've never heard a person who said, my life is not improved by education. I've never met someone who said, dang it, I never should have learned that.
It may have been hard. I might have had to struggle to get through it, but on the other side of it, it's really good. And you talk about that is the danger of the single story. I love that podcast or that TED talk that talks about that, because that is the beauty of it all, is that you need to hear different narratives. And there's so many people who are trying to take that narrative and co-opt it, right? And so what do you think about those individuals who don't let Black history be a part of the conversation? What do you say to them?
Well, I honestly think it's ridiculous. You first of all have to understand that American history is going to include Black history. If you are someone who says all lives matter, then inherently you
Right.
have to accept that Black lives matter.
Right.
And so same is true with history. And so by not teaching it, by quote unquote ignoring it, it's not going away.
Yes.
You're just creating more ignorance because you won't address what is factual. And this is the thing. People, if you're talking about, the critical race theory and teachings and stuff like that, no one is making these things up. These are factual things.
That's what I'm saying. I think about that. I was watching the footage of some of the things that happened in Tulsa, right? And I think about what happened in Birmingham and other places, Montgomery, and the footage, just the footage alone of people being with fire hoses and being washed down, so to speak. And I think about this burning, the whole town burning, and the buildings, you can see the structure. That's not Hollywood. That was real life. You can tell that was real life, and people deny that. And so that they can continue to whitewash or make people feel good about the fact that they didn't do that. They didn't do that damage, or they didn't do that hatred towards
which to me is counterproductive. Why not? You can't move forward from something that you don't acknowledge. So why would you pretend that these are not factual events that happened?
Right.
Because from there you can start a path forward, but you'll never move forward if you refuse to even acknowledge.
Yeah. And so, that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to get educated, to become part of the society in a way that is different, right? We need to have legislators who can be in the different places, who can hopefully finally get into the governor's office and do some things in the state of Florida that help us kind of remember that. But there's such a fear. There's such a fear of what might happen if people of color get into positions of power, and I don't even want to look at it in terms of power, but their rightful place at the table.
Well, I think, and certainly, I guess this is the part where I say these are my opinions and only my opinions,
Yeah.
and none of the organizations. But if you study, right, you understand that racism is systemically embedded in what we do. And so you're right, there is a fear that you may start to undo systems that keep a certain people in power, keep certain people in decision-making positions. And that is really the fear, is that that they will then have to actively undo some of these systems that still, quite frankly, are in place. Not everything, but still there are some systems in place that need to be addressed.
Right.
And if you get the right people in place who are concerned about these issues and can propose solutions, then that takes away some of the power and some of the economic opportunities from another group, and that's not what people want.
Right. I say that all the time. I think I look at that. I said the reason why we don't want to be oppressed is so that we can have our own. There's nothing about what is in somebody else's home that I want. I want to be able to create and have access to it myself, right? I want to be able to use my gifts and the talents that I have to move myself forward. But the fear is that people who don't have, or who are coming from the margins, so to speak, want something that somebody else has. Now, I will tell you, yes. Do I want inherited wealth? Yes, I want that for myself and my community. I do. Do I want to have a house on a hill? Yes, I do. I want to have a house on the hill, but I don't want your house. right? And so this narrative that they have is that we're coming for you, right? You know, there was this thing that was happening a couple of years ago that said they're coming for your communities. I don't want your community. I'm very content.
It's I think if you really, really think about the breadth and the depth of some of the atrocities that have been acted upon African American people specifically.
Yes.
I understand that every group of people has their own struggle, but African American people specifically, it's hard to imagine that if African American people get into a position of power, that there would not be some punitive nature, but that in fact is not true. Very much to your point, I don't want what you have. I just want the ability to build what I have and what I can. And you can have a house on the hill, and so can I. Who says that we can't both?
Right.
So I
right, and I think that there's this fear that again goes back to this fear that people think that, you know, I always think of it this way. They think that we're going to say, you know what? We're in positions of power now. Guess what? We're going to start slavery all over again. But we know that mistake. We know that past. We don't want to relive that again, because that was dumb. That was not even dumb. I mean, I'm using crazy words, right? But it was such an atrocity to human nature, to people, that really what we're looking for are people to come forward and be themselves in who they are, right? Be able to find or forge their pathway. If you're talking about it from an ethnocentric point of view, where you're saying everybody needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get themselves moving forward, if you're saying that's what you really want, then why are you blocking it?
And why do you know, again, I forget who said it. It's like you're saying pull myself up by my bootstraps, but I don't have boots, much less straps. And so, and we don't all start from an equal playing field. We don't all start at the same block. And so it's naive to believe that somehow if like you said, from an ethnocentric standpoint, if we're at a disadvantaged position, that somehow it's our fault. That's inherently untrue.
Right.
And so, and you know, when you even talk about the basis of economic wealth in this country, particularly in the South, with agrarian, you know, commerce, a lot of the wealth was built on the labor of enslaved Black people.
Yes.
But we're not talking about that. And it's wealth that we have not had access to, did not have access to, and yet we were the ones who built it. Exactly. And so I think there are all of those things that go into play.
Yeah. So let me shift the gears a little bit and ask you, some of the work that you're doing in your new position and the things that are going on kind of really look at building community. And Juneteenth is coming up. And what kind of things or plans do you have, or do you hope that the communities can kind of embrace when the 19th rolls around?
Well, I think, first of all, I want everyone to know what Juneteenth is. I think I'm still sometimes surprised that Juneteenth is unknown. Well, what is it? Why do we celebrate it? What's going on? So I think it starts again from, here's my broken record, it starts again from a place of education. What is Juneteenth? Why is it important? Why should it be celebrated? But then I also want it to be widely accessible, right? Understand that it is a cause for jubilation because it does mark the true end of slavery, because it marks when the last of the enslaved people understood that or were freed from enslavement. Right. So I think that is something I wanted to have the same energy because again, at that date in Galveston, Texas, it was a cause for jubilation. And so I want that same energy. I want that same 2021 Juneteenth jubilation to happen. And I know there are several events and panels that are taking place. I know that UCF and we are working to present a panel, and we have a week of Juneteenth activities So I think I just want everyone to understand and take part. There are so many choices. There are block parties. There's a jazz concert. And so I just want people to immerse yourselves and really enjoy what may be available.
You know, it's really interesting. When I was younger, when I first became aware of what Juneteenth was, for a couple of years, I would hear people talk about Juneteenth, but I wasn't smart enough to think about going and doing research on what that was. I would just see Black folks getting dressed up and going out, right? I was in college, right? And they were just getting up, I'm going to the Juneteenth celebration. I grew up in Connecticut, and they were going out in Hartford. They said, we're going to Hartford and we're going to go out to this Juneteenth celebration. And then I got invited to go to a Juneteenth celebration. And that's when I started to pay attention to what it was. Right? Because we kind of got all dressed up and we went and kind of enjoyed it. And so my first thing was, why are all these people being uppity and going to this event, right? And then I understood that what it was all about, because I got the history, which what you're talking about, that importance of history. And so when I was able to kind of go in and be amongst people who were celebrating this cause or this wonderful opportunity to celebrate our emancipation, then it sunk in. And from that point on, it moved forward. But you're right. Everybody doesn't know our history. They don't get it, even from our own community. And so it's important for us to kind of be able to find ways to acknowledge it and share people, because then people are always like, well, that's a funny way to say it. Why are they saying Juneteenth? You know, so those are the things that I think are also a part of the narrative that you need to share with folks as you try to tell them or bring them up to speed on why we celebrate this.
Absolutely. And so the Wellsville Museum has celebrated Juneteenth for several years, for even before I joined, for a very long time. And so this year it's going to be a bit more scaled down, COVID and different things that have impacted, but specifically just for the Wellsville, this is what I will say. We're hosting a spoken word event on the 18th, the night of the 18th. That's the Friday at 6 p.m. And I'll give more information, but there are so many different events that are happening throughout the city. And I know you have a wide listenership, but in any city, I bet you can find a Juneteenth celebration where we can all immerse ourselves in the jubilation of emancipation. But then I think also it's an opportunity to acknowledge the work, the labor that traditionally we've done. So
I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be in San Diego.
Okay.
During the time, so I'm looking into seeing what's happening in that area while I'm going to be away.
And I know there's going to be something. So
that's I'm excited for that. But I also want to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about something I learned. We talked last time we talked that you had some history with the Orlando Magic.
The Orlando Magic is currently, they're building the Amway Arena, is currently not even a block, it's like a corner away. And so the museum has enjoyed a long partnership with the Orlando Magic organization and their community service, things that they are wanting to do. And I am, first of all, let me say, I'm a Magic fan. As you said in my bio, I'm from Orlando. I was there when the team came. So I kind of feel like this is my team.
Okay.
So I'm a fan, but I'm really a fan of the fact that as a athletic organization, as a corporation, they have really taken it upon themselves to be good community stewards and good community participants. And I say that because it's not anything that I take for granted. Okay. There are a lot of companies and corporations and organizations that move into a footprint and don't give any consideration to how they can be a community partner, but the Orlando Magic has done a good job with that. And so I enjoy the partnership that they have established with the museum.
Yeah.
And recently they recognized me as a social justice game changer, which was humbling, but I was very honored, and I got a jersey.
Yeah.
So, I know we're not in the playoffs, but next season I may have to put my jersey on and get out there on the floor.
That's right. So congratulations to you.
Thank
Again,
you.
a testament to all the work that you have been doing. I know that you have a history. I mean, your family has been involved. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I neglected to say, when you were asking about how I got involved with the museum, I should have said that the museum was founded by my mother, who is currently a sitting Florida representative. So she's in the Florida House of Representatives. And so Geraldine Thompson, she founded the museum and founded it in the late 1990s, but it opened in 2001.
Okay.
So again, 20 years ago.
Right.
And then my father is, he was the first African-American judge in Orange County. So I grew up in a household where, and I say this all the time, I was told that you have to pay rent where you live, okay? And that is probably literal, but it's also figurative. You cannot live in a community and not give back. Right. Your service and your involvement is the rent you pay for where you live. So I grew up, and it was always emphasized that you have to participate in your community. Okay. And so that's what I try to do.
That's great. That's great. And you've been doing a phenomenal job. And yeah, I want to kind of hitch myself up to your bandwagon and figure out how I can stay involved as well. I mean, I'm looking definitely to do that. We've talked about how we're trying to kind of do some work in the Parramore area, but I do know that those connections are important, and you used your connections well, to the point where it's not about being selfish. It's about really giving back. And you've been able to prove that time and time again. So
none of us do it alone.
Yeah.
We all do things and better and more when we work together. Mm-hmm. And so that's my testament.
Yeah, that's really good. I need to get more involved with the Orlando Magic. I was a part of the mentoring program that they have. I went there and I did a talk with the young men who are part of that mentoring program. And I think that that's a phenomenal thing as well, because there are so many young people who look up to sports figures and want to be like them. And this program went in and said, you don't have to just think about sports. I mean, there are other ways that you can be a part of this organization and not be on the basketball court. There are other things that you can do to improve your lot in life, in terms of being an engineer or lawyer, like your father, a judge, all those things that are things that they were trying to instill in these young people. And I was so impressed with that. And I think that's probably what drew you too, because it wasn't about, them just trying to make money for the Orlando Magic. It was really about them doing the work that's necessary to make sure that the community builds and grows.
I agree 100%. And I think you're right. It's a lot of the careers that we don't talk about, right? It's not always lawyers and doctors, but maybe you can grow up and be in community engagement, or maybe you can be a professor or a department chair, or, now with media the way it is, host a podcast. Yeah. So there's a lot of different career paths. And I think if we can expose youth to as many as possible, then you can be a part of the Magic and not be on the courts.
Not be on the court. And I mean, and that's what, and again, the beaming with pride comes from doing a job well done, right? And understanding why you're there and knowing that you are helping push the narrative forward. It doesn't have to be, the athlete that's doing it. It's the other people who are helping to keep that operation going, and for the right of people to kind of enjoy, but also to build. I mean, so hopefully the Parramore community is really going to thrive as the organization continues to thrive. And so they get to build from that. So I do know that you are about to take a flight. And so I don't want to hold you too much longer, but is there anything that you want to share? You said you have some things you wanted to drop in terms of things that are coming up. So tell me a little bit about those things, but then I want to give you the opportunity to kind of gracefully get out of here. So
I appreciate it. Thank you. No, I think, again, I just wanted to encourage everyone to participate in the Juneteenth activities that align with what you want to do. And I guarantee you there's something that aligns with what you want to do. The Wellsville Museum is hosting a spoken word event on Friday, the 18th, starting at 6 p.m. I know that there are a lot of panel discussions, one hosted by the division of UCF and a committee from UCF. And so we will have a panel discussion also Friday, the 18th at noon. And so we really just want people to have access to the education, the information, and the celebration.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, this is all in love. This is all in terms of educating people for a better future. For all, right? Like you said, all lives matter, right? And hopefully we can get people to start to buy into that and understand that and not get taken away from all the misdirection that's being put out there about what's really happening in Black and brown communities. And so I really appreciate you. I hope.
Thank you. I'm hoping I can come back another time, but I appreciate you having me, and thank you so much.
So like I said, before I met you and I heard about you, I was like, I have to have her on the show. And you know, what I wanted to do, and maybe we can do this, I really wanted to, this is Black History Month, I believe, that I really wanted to kind of explore, you know, what was happening at the Wellsville, what people would see when they came in those doors. And maybe we can come back and we can visit that and something else, but you're doing so many great things. And so I don't want to tie your hands just to that particular museum, but I do know that, you know, the knowledge that you dropped today, you know.
Oh, I appreciate that.
I'm sitting in awe actually, because I brought up, you know, we didn't talk about this beforehand. I brought up Tulsa, and you were able to drop things about Tulsa. We talked about all these other things that are going on. And so, you know, I really, 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 truly appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge base with us. And again, another thing we might be able to do is get you and your mom in here to talk, because I mean, I got a chance to talk with her as well. And she's also a phenomenal woman.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, we could definitely make all of those things happen.
So thank you. I want you to go ahead, because I'm scared.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want you to go and catch your flight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And
thank you.
You be good. And everybody,
bye-bye.
Join us on Friday when we have a new podcast host who is coming into the UCF future. Alex Cummings is really an up-and-coming young man. He's an actor. He's a student at UCF, and he's starting a podcast out of the UCF. And I can't remember the name right now, but it's happening. Look it up. And what you can, Knights Do That. I think it's something like that. Yes, Knights Do That. And so please join us on Friday as he gets to talk a little bit about what's happening with his podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Elizabeth Thompson, for all that you shared, that mic drop, and we'll see you all next time.